This is Pramod Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad, and here we continue our exploration of posthumanism in adjunct or adjacent fields. Posthumanism has had its influence on literary fiction, on practices such as nursing and medicine. It has seen its very valuable, very tangible presence in discourses about, say, climate change. It has been a part of much artistic endeavors and projects in the last 10 to 20 years. It has been prefigured in art, it has been anticipated in art, but art has also contributed to posthumanist ways of thinking. So you can think of the transaction between posthumanism and the arts, which includes literary texts, as a two-way process, as a transaction that posthumanism has influenced and impacted the arts, but it has also learned from the arts. And as we have seen in the case of posthumanism's intersections with the Anthropocene or with feminist studies of science and technology, philosophical assumptions have been overturned or expanded, if you want to think about it in that fashion. Literary critical approaches have been modified. Our attitude towards, say, animals and plants have also been considerably modified. And this, like I said, is a transaction which has gone back and forth between the posthumanist critical theory school. But most of those who practice posthumanism have done so in the field of literature, arts, architecture, and subfields such as animal studies, ethics, philosophy, and more recently in law, performance arts, and other fields. In what follows today, we shall focus on what is called bioart. Bio as in the word biology, and art as one portmanteau term. Bioart is, as you can imagine from the name itself, biological art. Okay, and this arises somewhere in the 1990s and has now become more or less established as an art form. The precursors of these ones, as you will hear in the next few minutes, weren't thinking of their work as post-humanist. They were reconfiguring the human and they were rethinking what the human is. And in many cases, they integrated technology into their artwork. They thereby questioned the boundaries of the human. They questioned what prosthesis actually means. They wondered as to what the mixture of the human form and technology was possibly going to look like. So, bioart, like I said, is the mixture of biology and art. And in simple terms, bioart can be defined as the use of living matter, living material, biological material, as the site and as the substance of artwork. Now, biological material, which includes tissue, for example, is mixed with technology and technological apparatuses to show how nature, within quotes, and culture, also within quotes, can be brought together. You will remember that we have spoken about the term nature culture as one term, following Donna Haraway. Bioart is a living example, and I use the word living in all its senses. Bioart is a living example of nature culture, where nature, that is biology, and culture, which is man-made technology, come together. As Oren Katz, one of the early practitioners of bioart, puts it, it focuses on the cultural understandings of the very idea of life. And the point is, and this is very important, the idea about or notions of or theories of life were for a very long time seen as the domain, as the province of the biologists alone. Oren Katz and others asked, what kind of art is possible if you bring nature and culture together? And remember, nature culture is a foundational premise in posthumanist thought, that nature as we see it is not outside culture, as we spoke about in weak force modules. Nature is not something out there, and culture is not something pure and segregated from it. Neither is nature. We need to think in terms of nature culture as one continuum, not even, it will be uneven, but it's a continuum. So bioart is messing around with the border. Where does nature end? Where does culture begin? Can we think of nature without man-made culture? And is there no nature in man-made culture? Can we see culture as a purely man-made, technologically constructed domain? Or should we think of culture as assimilating or building upon or being sustained by nature? How are we supposed to envisage this? So the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that our cultural understanding of what we mean by life has always been the domain of biologists. But what about art? And you will remember here, of course, that the first excuse me, illustrations of the human form, the first images and diagrams of the human form, well before photography and the digital, these were done by artists. And many of you will know Leonardo da Vinci's classic Vitruvian Man, right? The image, the first complete image of the human done by an artist. And the idea is to say, can we talk about biology or biological matter as also providing us the source of art? Can art illustrate biology? Can art demonstrate biology or biological matter? And the answer is clearly yes, it can. So Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is in many ways the first instantiation of art meeting biology or art illustrating biology. So that's the point. The cultural understandings of life, which have always been seen as the domain of the biologists, now produce art. Bioart's interests include looking at the technologization of nature, which is, say, for example, genetic modification, that we have test tube babies in the beginning, and now we have stem cell engineering, we have the manufacturing of clones, we have various methods by which gene manipulation can be done after the invention of CRISPR technology. We have all sorts of laboratories over the last 2 decades that have mapped the human genome, the Human Genome Project. We now have the Human Microbiome Project and numerous other things. The question is, of course, whether genetic modification can be made to order, as in customized. But the ethics of this is not really my subject here. I'm just outlining here what bioart is, and I'm beginning with bioart's interests. The technologization of nature. It also pays considerable attention to the ways in which life as in life forms have evolved with technology. You will remember posthumanism's fundamental tenet, or rather one of its fundamental tenets, is that technology is not a prosthesis to the human. Humans and technology have co-evolved. That's one of the basic foundations of bioart as well. Then it also is interested in studying the environment and its degradation. And here again, nature and culture come together because it's cultural practices that have caused the deterioration of the environment. And following from that, what has been the impact that humanity has had on the planet? What have we done to make the planet the way it is now? And you will remember some of the debates around posthumanism and the Anthropocene, which are related to this point here. There is also an interest in exploitation and commodification of living matter, as in how biological matter has been manipulated, exploited, made into consumer products. Finally, the practices and practitioners of bioart are interested in the possibilities of using art to draw attention to very specific problems or crises. Planetary crisis, the manipulation of identity, the question of biological ethics, including, of course, cloning and artificial reproductive technology, the ART, as as people like Sarah Franklin and others have already discussed in considerable detail in their feminist studies of these sciences. So these are some of the domains in which bioart has its interest. All these themes are subjects for very elaborate art projects. They are available to us in the form of film, sculpture, installation art, and all of this, please understand, use living tissue. All of these use living tissue. They use lab generated life. They use the technology of the laboratories, and they use, of course, the environment. One of the first instances of art which tries to demonstrate and depict and capture genetic science was Eduardo Kack's GFP Bunny, what he called transgenic art. The links are there for you to look up. I have not put in the visuals here primarily for copyright reasons, but they're easily available anywhere online. Transgenic art is the subject of a set of essays also in Eduardo Kack's book. And Kack used synthetic genes, inserted them into an organism, and he created a creature with a special trait. You will remember our idea of the chimera. He created a chimera, and the rabbit which he created was a glowing rabbit, as in it would glow in the dark. What does this do? What is the purpose of a glowing rabbit? Bioart is a critique of how technology operates on living material. It shows that technology can be used for good or for bad. It can be used for positive results or bad results. Technology by itself is not the problem. As people like Kack have demonstrated over the years, technology's ethical use is something we have to debate. Is something humans who create labs, who fund these projects, have to think about, have to consider, right? So, bioart critiques technology. It critiques the employment of technology upon living tissue and asks, is this what we are supposed to do? What are the consequences of producing artwork like this? What are the consequences of technology intervening directly in, say, biological process or biological structures? Do we need to do this? And if so, how? What are the ethical concerns? When the GFP Bunny, as Eduardo Kack named this glowing rabbit, when the images came out, it was very clear that there has been genetic manipulation. Now, we do know of mythical creatures called chimeras, right? They are the chimera, traditionally, mythically speaking, was a creature that was a mix of a goat, a lion, and a serpent. The chimera, this mythical creature, clearly had DNA from very different species. The lion, the goat, and the serpent. Very different, very distinct species. And it was merged into one animal, which means the chimera was the result of genetic crossovers. And this mythical creature and we have mythical creatures of chimerical kinds in all cultures around the world. And the question is, what are the possibilities that these chimeras represent? If you look at Alexis Rockman's painting about farms and Matthew Barney's Cremaster cycle, those are explorations of the possibilities of chimeras. What do chimeras represent? Chimeras represent the possible route of evolution. That evolution can also happen this way. And one of the early practitioners of this form of merging biology with technology in the human form was the Greek artist Stelarc. Stelarc attached an extra ear, he attached an extra prosthetic arm. And using the three hands, so he had two quote-unquote natural hands, and he had a third arm which he attached from here. Using the three hands at his disposal, he wrote one word on the board: evolution. Evolution. What was Stelarc trying to do? Stelarc was saying What stops us from improving ourselves? What stops us from adding things to ourselves? Why do we assume that human evolution could only happen in this fashion, in one particular fashion? What if human evolution can also take different paths? The chimera represents the possibilities of evolution, of where humanity can possibly go. And the question Stellark is asking is, why should we leave the processes and stages and direction of evolution to nature? Suppose we can control it. Suppose we manipulate it. Suppose we take charge of it. Remember, Darwin argued that the survival of the fittest is the nature's way of ensuring evolutionary paths, that nature will pick the most suited. Stellark is asking, why should we leave it to nature? Why can't we manage it? Why can't we control it? Why can't we manipulate it? So the point Stellark is making is more akin to transhumanism than posthumanism. Remember, transhumanism says we can transcend the bodily limits, our biological limitations, through the use of technology or pharmacological interventions. Stellark is asking, well, why should humanity leave it to nature to evolve in certain ways? Why can't we be in control of our own futures? Because we have the technology to do so now. Now, Stellark and Eduardo Kac are the early people, practitioners of this. Later, a biological arts project at the University of Western Australia, pioneered by Oron Katz, whose definition of bioart I've already quoted, put together something called symbiotica. Symbiotic, as you know, is a biological phenomenon where species coexist for mutual benefit. But symbiotica, I'm assuming there's no clarity on this, A stands for art, symbiotic arts. This included things like the autotroph projects and the tissue culture projects. And the idea in projects like these was, can we bring together life forms that occur in nature and life forms that are created by humans in laboratories? As in, one is quote unquote natural and one is lab created. Can we bring those two together? In stage 2, Oron Katz and his team placed epidermal and connective tissue from our skins over polymers and glass and showed how polymers merge with biological matter. So biological and lab matter come together, which is why we now increasingly have organic materials for transplantation and artificial organs, where organic material is cultivated in the lab. In another project titled Crude Matter, I have given a link for you at the foot of the slide, the TCA project, that's the Tissue Culture and Art project, for you to take a look at it. It's called Crude Matter. They placed cells over different substrates, and those substrates began to absorb those cells, merge them. So that is one way of thinking about how nature and culture can merge. But that's not all. Bioart also sent out very significant environmental messages. For example, tissue culture and art created something called victimless leather. Victimless leather. Those of you who are aware of this will know that leather is only possible by the slaughter of animals. And animal ethicists and animal rights activists have been going on about how, for fashion's sake, we are doing this. So leather means essentially killing animals and transforming them into commodities, into consumer products. These are produced in labs and factories and things like that. But victimless leather was an attempt to create leather grown in a lab, which means there's no need to harm animals, but you can still have leather, which is organically produced, supposedly, but they are produced in labs. So environmental messages. But much of this artwork also brought together posthumanist concerns to think about the Anthropocene. So people have asked in artworks like Lilienthal Water Wash, which are basically exercises in the blue humanities, they draw attention to the crisis of water supply on our planet, which includes toxic dumping, the crisis of the waterways, the commodification of water, and things like that. And things like the exhibition, yes, naturally, how art saves the world, asks questions like, who decides what is natural? Who decides that we need to take decisions about these things? As Heather Davis and Etienne Turpin point out, Anthropocene art, as bioart is now sometimes called, is an attempt to alter our modes of perception. Alter our modes of perception about nature, about the way we use leather, the way we talk about animals, the way, for example, we fell trees to make it into paper, which then becomes something else, and so on and so forth. So, Anthropocene art, as bioart is often called, is an attempt to draw attention to the crises that are the result of what humans have done. Okay, let's take a look at Cecil Meriton and Heather Leslie's project, Becoming a Sentinel Species. It is a project put together by Cecil Meriton, Heather Leslie of the Department of Environment and Health, the University of Amsterdam, Joan Garcia Vallejo, who is also at Amsterdam Medical College and is a specialist in immunological and molecular biological sciences. Sentinel species are species that tell us that something is wrong. We know, for example, that canary, the bird, the canaries are sent into mines to check whether there is toxic gas. If the canaries come back alive, that means it's safe for humans to go, which means the canary bird serves as a warning system. But there are other sentinel species, and the disappearance of certain species is an indication that a crisis is at hand. You will remember, if you please, the previous lesson in which we looked at Charlotte McConaghy and Barbara Kingsolver and other novelists who spoke about disappearing species and who asked, what happens when the animals disappear? We'll be left all alone once the animals go. But the question that the artists in Becoming a Sentinel Species ask is, should only animals be sentinel species? Can humans also be? There's a fictional film made about it, and researchers here inject microplastics from the sea into their bloodstream, and therefore they have hallucinations about the sea, which is actually an attempt to show that we all came from the sea, as in life came from the sea. But in real life, Cecil Meriton had her blood taken and microplastics injected into it, and they watched through the microscope how Cecil Meriton's macrophages, those are often called the first responders to any attack in the cell, and how these started attacking the invaders. The point is, the artist's blood is the artistic material. The biological matter of the artist is itself the artistic material. So like some artists use mud, others use wood, and some use plastic. In this case, the artist used the blood from within the body itself. And then is asking, how do toxins affect my blood? What are the consequences of ingesting these? So biological material here means toxic material. Microplastics are all around us. And people will tell you that there is a large quantum of plastics which we ingest on a regular basis. And those have very profound, very dangerous consequences in the long run. So, Cecil Meriton's project here, Becoming a Sentinel Species, says our bodies can be sentinel bodies. Our bodies can be dangerously at risk, and that provides the context for a future where we can envisage what humanity will be or will become. This project is a critique of species exceptionalism, where we have believed that we are the prime species, we are at the top of the species. But are we? Are we really? We have created this speciesism. As you know, posthumanist thought rejects the idea that we share a vulnerability with other life forms. And you will remember the previous sessions in which we spoke about shared vulnerabilities. Environmental toxins cannot be the problem of one species. several species, including the humans, are part of this process of environmental toxification. The point that these people make is, as in the artists and the biologists make, is all species are subject to environmental pollution. And it's our job to consider whether we are sentinel species or we want to make some other species sentinels. In short, the entire process of using bioart is to alert us to environmental disaster.